In this video, I'm going to break down DeepSeek R1-0528, the model that quietly launched just a few weeks ago. What makes this release so interesting is that at first, there was no official announcement, no blog post, no model card, just the model suddenly appearing. And since then, the community has been digging into benchmarks, tests, and even practical demos to figure out what this thing can really do. So in this video, I'll go over what we know about R1 so far, how you can start using it today, and I'll also show you a couple demonstrations, both with the API and in a chat interface, so you can see how it performs in practice. Right away, one big positive is the license. DeepSeek R1 is MIT licensed, which means you're free to build on it, fine-tune it, and even ship commercial products without restriction. For an open-source reasoning model, that's a huge deal. Many open releases come with Apache or other licenses that carry some restrictions. MIT licensing makes R1 about as flexible as it gets. Now let's talk performance. On Live Codebench, R1 slots just between GPT 3.5 03 Mini High and GPT 4 Mini 04 Medium. That makes it very competitive, especially considering it's open source. And if we zoom out at the leaderboard, almost every model above it is closed source. Right now, if you want top-tier coding power from an open model, your only real choices are Qwen and DeepSeek. That matters because open models give developers freedom to host, modify, and integrate however they want without vendor lock-in. Another fascinating data point came from the ADAR Polyglot benchmark, which tests multilingual reasoning. The old R1 scored 56.9, but the new build jumps to 70.7, basically tied with Claude Opus. That's a huge leap in just one generation, and it shows how quickly open-source systems are closing the gap with closed-source frontier models. For context, a jump of over 10 points on ADAR Polyglot isn't just incremental. It signals that this model can now tackle far more complex reasoning tasks in multiple languages. And then there's the NYT Connections benchmark, where R1 went from 38.6 to 49.8. On reasoning, it's hitting just above Gemini 2.5 Pro, on thinking tokens maxing out at 16,000 tokens of chain of thought. That's a lot of reasoning depth for an open model. While Gemini and Claude still lead in structured long context performance, the fact that DeepSeek is competing at all in this category shows just how quickly open models are evolving. Of course, no model release is complete without the now famous bouncing ball in a hexagon test, and here R1 still looks a little rough. The physics don't quite match what we've seen from closed-source leaders like Claude or Grok, but that's really just a fun benchmark. What matters more is how it codes, reasons, and solves real-world developer problems. So how do you actually try it? The easiest option is OpenRouter. Just hours after release, R1 already had 6 different providers hosting it, and that number keeps growing. OpenRouter is great because it doesn't just give you access to the model, it also gives you stats, median throughput, token pricing, and even latency comparisons across providers. You can pick the endpoint that fits your needs best, whether you want lowest cost, fastest response time, or largest context window. And speaking of cost, 1 rand is very cheap compared to competitors. Input tokens are around 50 cents per million, output tokens at about $2.18 per million. That blends to just over $1 per million tokens, cheaper than Gemini 2.5 reasoning, and even competitive with OpenAI's smaller mini models. And because hosting providers are competing against each other, these prices could drop even further. For developers, that means you can build with reasoning power close to Claude, at a fraction of the cost. Now let's look at how it performs in practice. On chat.deepseek.com, I asked it to build a landing page for a YouTube channel. The prompt was simple: modern styles and subtle animations. R1 broke the request down step by step in its thinking trace, then generated full HTML and CSS. And here's the interesting part. Unlike many models that default to Tailwind or other utility frameworks, R1 wrote raw CSS from scratch. The result wasn't perfect. A few icons were misaligned, some quotes cut off. But overall, it built a functional, styled landing page on the first pass. With just 1 sentence of instructions, that's impressive. When I ran the code, it even included subtle hover effects and a unique artistic background of shapes. For UI development and rapid prototyping, R1 shows real promise. To push things further, I also tested it with an API workflow. I asked it to build a simple Python script that calls a third-party API, parses the JSON response, and writes the output to a CSV file. Again, it handled the breakdown logically, wrote the code, and even included inline comments explaining each step. I only had to tweak one variable, and it ran correctly on the first try. That level of structured reasoning in code generation is where R1 starts to shine. So how do you access it? Besides chat, you can grab an API key on OpenRouter and hit the endpoints directly. You can even use the OpenAI SDK as a drop-in replacement, which makes integration really straightforward. And right now, there's even a free endpoint available if you want to test it without spending a dime. Until then, R1 is already live, already hosted, and already usable. If you're a developer, this is definitely one to put on your radar. And let me leave you with this thought. Over the past year, we've seen an explosion of AI models, but very few that were both powerful and open. R1 could signal the start of a new wave where open source AI isn't just playing catch-up, but actually competing head-to-head with the biggest closed systems. If that happens, it changes the game completely. It means more transparency, more customization, and far lower costs for everyone building in this space. So, what should you do with it right now? If you're a hobbyist, spin it up on OpenRouter and try some side projects. See how it compares to ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini on your favorite prompts. If you're running a startup, test it inside your workflow. Plug it into CI/CD, use it for debugging, or run it against your existing codebase to see how it handles complex reasoning. And if you're just curious, there are free endpoints you can hit today, so there's really no barrier to entry. Here's the bigger picture. Models like Claude, Gemini, Grok, and Qwen are all racing forward with cutting-edge benchmarks. But until now, the open source ecosystem has always felt a step behind. DeepSeek R1 shows that gap is closing, and quickly. If open models can deliver frontier-level reasoning at a fraction of the cost, that forces the entire market to adjust. Closed providers will have to rethink pricing, improve transparency, and compete harder for developer mindshare. That's why this release matters so much. It's not just about another benchmark score, it's about momentum. It's about giving developers freedom, lowering the barrier to entry, and letting anyone with an idea experiment without restrictions. And the more people who test, build, and share what they create with R1, the faster the ecosystem as a whole moves forward. So I'll be keeping a close eye on how this develops, and I'll keep you updated as we see what DeepSeek and the community around it builds next. If you found this breakdown useful, make sure to like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss future updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.